So one of the things with the Labrynth-based strategy is, of course, the ability to play on your opponent's turns with cards like Arius, Kuklok, Stovey Torby, etc. So it'll be interesting to see how Labrynth lines up against this Chimera strategy.
Raymond taking a moment there to just assess his plays. Looks like we're seeing a couple of starters there and some great trap cards. It looks like Samuel's going first, actually, so we are going to go ahead and start off with Nightmare Apprentice. Nightmare Apprentice is a great new card from Legacy of Destruction. Certainly reminds your Apprentice Illusion Magician, but has such a wide access to a variety of cards from the Illusion strategy, and it just shows you how powerful this new type has become, right? So often we get something new like Cybers, Worms, Psychics, etc. And Illusion's really starting to become its own deck, but playing it with the Chimera stuff feels good. So we're going to go ahead and add that Chimera-friendly card, the Mirror Sword Knight, from the deck to the hand. Yeah,
a card like Mirror Sword Knight is an integral part to this deck strategy. Anytime that the Illusion-based strategies get to open Mirror Sword Knight, it really increases the ceiling of their opening play. And now adding 3 copies of Nightmare Apprentice, brand new card out of Legacy of Destruction, allows you now to continually see access to that Sword Knight on the opening turn with higher degrees. So it really, I think, adds a huge element to this strategy.
It's kind of what makes Illusion so powerful, is that it just doesn't go away. It looks like we're going to respond with Arius here, discarding it to activate its effects and setting that Dharma Cannon.
So as I mentioned before, even though the Labrynth strategy did not win the die roll, the ability to play on the opponent's turn with a collection of trap cards like, as you just mentioned a moment ago, Destructive Karma Cannon, gives it a unique capacity that some strategies don't necessarily have.
So it looks like we're going to try to chain that Dharma Cannon to the summon of the Mirror Sword Knight. The Mirror Sword Knight has its own quick effect, tributing itself to add that big Baphomet from the deck to the hand, or excuse me, special summon it. But yes. Looks like it's time for the cannon, so we're going to be flipping these monsters face down. Very popular card now, and certainly a great choice by Raymond because it's so good against so many different decks, because there's so many Link-based decks right now. As long as it flips something face down, those Link monsters will stay in attack mode and get sent to the graveyard.
It also lines up really well against the Tenpai strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So Samuel here is looking at his extra deck.
Little Duel Academy lesson there. As a reminder, you're not going to be able to link with face-down monsters, so it looks like we're just going to be setting one and possibly passing. Oh, there we go. So off to Raymond's turn.
Looks like that was a cross-out designator, which unfortunately for Samuel is not going to line up very well. Raymond is playing, looks like Nibiru as the only hand interaction that's a little bit more universal, and it's not even one that Samuel plays, so that cross-out designator is not likely to be very impactful, though I guess Infinite Impermanence is shared between the decks as well. But certainly none of the engine cards out of Raymond's deck will line up against that cross-out designator.
A cross-out designator as a main deck card is certainly powerful when you've got a format where people are running about the same stuff in terms of answers, but when you run into one of those decks that has its own special branded answers, or in this case Labrynth, it doesn't really work as well.
Ariana, that's of course the most ideal normal summon out of Raymond's strategy. It's been universal in all of the Labrynth variations that we've seen over the last year or so.
Labrynth certainly got a lot of life left in it. Great set that it came out of, but I do think we're going to continue to see it as Fiend monsters are set to be pretty good this year. Searching through the deck here, let's see what we grab. I think we're going for the field spell here, the Labrynth. Oh, perhaps not.
So it will be important here for Raymond to clear out Samuel's monsters, especially something like Baphomet, because you don't want it to pass back to Samuel's turn and allow him to utilize that for a fusion summon, which would allow him then to special summon an illusion back from the graveyard. So Raymond is incentivized to clear out. It looks like he got one of the Labrynth traps here. It's going to be met by a Droll and Lockbird.
Now, interesting though, Labrynth has a lot of ways to get rid of monsters, but Illusion doesn't really care where those cards end up. The Chimera monsters have ways to get monsters back from your banishment, from your graveyard, and utilize resources from the hand. So even though he's pushing back, it's going to be really interesting to see this long grind game between these very resilient decks.
It is unfortunate for Samuel there, drawing a Droll and Lockbird. That's a card that historically has not lined up especially well against Labrynth-based strategies.
Labrynth loves to add, and Droll and Lockbird says no. But looks like we're going to go ahead and crash there, take a little bit of life point damage. Just 200 off the top. Unfortunately, the defense of that big wing Baphomet is just a little too big.
Looks like here we have a ultimate rare copy of Big Welcome Labrynth activated here in the battle phase. I think Raymond needed to attack into that Baphomet because he was unaware of what the defense points were. I mean, the Chimera is a relatively popular deck in the grand scheme of things. However, the intricacy is about, for example, the defense points of a monster that typically is never in defense mode or things that he might not be fully aware of. So he needed to see the defense strength of the Baphomet before he commits here to the lovely Labrynth play off of the Big Welcome Labrynth.
One of those few moments in competitive play where anime knowledge would have helped you.
Certainly.
But jokes aside, let's get back into it here as we see the lovely Labrynth at the field.
And Stovey Torby now is special summoned back from the graveyard. And it looks like he's going to send the crossout designator. As we commented on, that crossout designator isn't likely going to line up especially well in this matchup. That's certainly one of the first cards that I think Samuel will end up siding out heading into game 2.
Now, interesting, did not choose to use the crossout designator, which can be a heads-up play for the illusion deck. It can banish something and get it back later.
You also can use the card to slim cards out of your deck just in general, so that you can take cards that you don't necessarily want to draw out of your deck.
Well, maybe that means that every card in this deck is still a good card, but after that monster left the field, let's see what happens next.
Yeah, so the lovely Labrynth doesn't target, so we would have to activate that preemptively, so I guess you kind of have to weigh the value of increasing your draws versus allowing your opponent to destroy another card on the field.
Ah, that is true. She'd find her way in no matter what. Speaking of finding her way in, I don't know if we're going to find our way out here as Labrynth is set to the field. Maze is just getting a little bit deeper for Samuel, so he'll have to figure out a way once it's his turn again if he makes it that far.
Yeah, so a set here of the Dogmatic of Punishment.
Very strong position there with 3 face-down cards, the field spell of your dreams and your boss monster, only facing 1 card on the field. Illusion gets it going pretty fast, so Sam draws for turn.
Unfortunately, it looks like he's holding what looks like a Ghost Ogre and a copy of Infinite Impermanence that he just drew. 2 cards that don't line up especially well against the Labrynth-based strategies. Just one of the things inherently going for Labrynth right now is some of those cards. For example, an Infinite Impermanence on Aria can be annoying.
Great show of sportsmanship. Let's see if Samuel's luck turns around here with his first 5 cards.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think one of the things that was a point of contention in that previous game was not using the Mirror Sword Knight's quick effect upon the normal summon. That way he would be able to lock in the Sword Knight's effect as Chainlink 1, and then even if Raymond used that Daruma Cannon, because Chainlink 1 was the Sword Knight, the Baphomet would hit the field post Karma Cannon.
You're right.
And then the effect would trigger and allow him to search. So that was one kind of maybe misstep that we saw in that first game. It'll be interesting to see if he can navigate this particular game. And he's opening up again here, though, with that Nightmare Apprentice.
Nightmare Apprentice to add.
Looks like we're going back into the deck here, see what we add. Might be going right to the same line. Maybe the Cornfield Quaddle to discard it, then to get the Mirror Sword Knight. Kind of load up the graveyard with illusions first.
Interesting to see he still has Crossout Designator in his strategy.
Maybe he thinks there's something, or maybe he really is going to banish it and just didn't choose to for the reason that you mentioned earlier, because the lovely Labrynth could get it anyway. But yeah, the Crossout Designator is still there, so I wonder what cards did come in and out.
I would probably prefer to keep the Infinite Impermanence for a card like Ariana as opposed to that Crossout Designator. So I guess Crossout Designator gives you a reassurance against your opponent's Infinite Impermanence, which is just about the only card that it lines up with favorably here.
Raymond taking a deep look into Big Wing Baphomet this time, maybe memorizing its attack and defense points there, or just overall its effect if he doesn't have anything to get rid of it. It does look like Raymond's sizing up to, no, gonna go ahead and pass there. Commentator's curse.
Normal summon Gazelle, King of Mythical Claws. Gazelle, King of Mythical Claws effect to add.
Yep, so now he's going to be able to add a level 5 Fiend monster or a Chimera Fusion, which is presumably more likely. It looks like the Butler has been dropped down by Raymond. Ooh, a Dimensional Barrier.
Ooh, that's tough.
Yeah, that's one of the inherent disadvantages of playing a deck like Chimera. It's just the viability of Dimensional Barrier being in so many decks this weekend because of the rise of Tenpai.
Well, Tenpai, you're locking out the Synchros, but there's a lot of great applications for the card in general, and unfortunately, unlike some of the decks that are succeeding very well in tournaments, the Illusion Chimera can't just pivot back into Link monsters, so it's just going to chain the fusion there.
Oh, okay. Touche.
Oh, nice.
All right.
Okay. Okay, definitely showed us some Duel Academy secrets there. Samuel chaining the crossout designator to banish his own dimensional fissure to make sure that that does not resolve because its effect will be negated. It will resolve, but it will be negated.
Okay, I take back the discard of the infinite impermanence.
Hey, that's why they're up on the stage.
I don't want to say surprising is not necessarily the right word because obviously Labrynth can play on the opponent's turn with trap cards, but typically you see Crosslight Designator in the deck for going second into an established spell or trap card zone, as opposed to here, of course, under these unique circumstances, it's not inconceivable that a Labrynth deck would actually be able to activate Barrier on their opponent's opening turn, which we actually see here. So it's really interesting to see the value here of the Crossout Designator going first against Dimensional Barrier. It's very rare that you actually see that sequence, but it's going to open up now Samuel to do all of the various things that his Chimera strategy was unable to do in that first game.
I have to wonder if that was just a spur-of-the-moment decision or if someone has been playing against a lot of Labrynth back at home just to know how to do that.
King of Mythical Claws to add an illusion. Chain 2, Big Wing Berfomet to target an illusion and summon, targeting Cornfield Codal. And then chain 3, Chimera, King of Phantom Beast effect to send a card from hand to graveyard in the end phase.
So we're getting the full complement here of the different effects, and only on Chain Link 4 was Raymond able to do anything, but looks like he's not even going to respond. So Codal's going to go ahead and summon the...
And then add an illusion.
Now, what illusion to add here, though? Stellar first turn, though, really putting Raymond to task here, and going to be able to use the effect of that Chimera to grab something out of the hand.
I know, and against Labrynth, it's a deck that can sometimes find itself with very few cards in hand just because of how many inherent discards. And if you can cut the engine off, over time the engine will just rebuild with the furniture pieces like Chandelier and Kuklok and Stovey Torby. But if you cut them off where they've committed a lot of cards in their hand, but they haven't reestablished the hand presence, you can actually outright win because of that. And having that additional send during the end phase is going to be huge.
It looks like the Chimera is going to fly right out of this maze this time.
We have Chimera Fusion added back to the hand. That once per turn effect.
Taking a moment to decide where to go next. Already a strong presence on the board and off to a much better start than the first duel, so we definitely got ourselves a match here.
Now we're really seeing the power of what that newly released Nightmare Apprentice enables. Being able to see Mirror Sword Knight so frequently is a huge benefit to this strategy.
Just going into SP Little Knight, certainly still a popular card, and I guess there were some Link monsters there just in case the Dimensional Barrier did resolve and cancel out fusions, but certainly just a much stronger start and has various tools in the graveyard there as well, with Quaddle being down there. So just have to see how Raymond's able to get into the game. Obviously taking that first win, not going to be a big deal. He can always go into game 3.
Set one card, proceed to end phase, Chimera will rip. Do you want to just go
All right, going to use a die to randomly decide which card the Chimera is going to go ahead and send
From Raymond Dye's hand.
from Raymond Dye's hand. Ah, die.
This looks like that was a Dogmatica Punishment. Looks like a super rare, potentially, copy of Dogmatica Punishment.
Dogmatica Punishment just being such a great card with Elder Entity Intus, but there's a lot of different things you could do with it too, and being a normal trap card just feels great in that deck.
So it looks like Raymond has a copy of, I think there's a Big Welcome Labrynth in his hand, but I can't quite make out the other card in his hand.
Now drawing for turn.
Another copy of Dogmatica Punishment.
I guess that didn't feel so bad.
Oh, yeah.
I think it might be Big Welcome Labrynth, and a Dogmatica Punishment.
A lot of traps, but not necessarily those helpful little Labrynth monsters to get things going.
And unfortunately with the Chimera Fusion set, I think it's going to be tough to get through this. But we'll see. So we just used his Butler to enable him to activate this Welcome Labrynth the turn that it is set.
So we're going to chain the Arius effect to that activated Chimera Fusion.
So that's a huge advantage point there. If Labrynth can keep the Butler on the field throughout the duration of the opponent's turn, you can use its on-field effect to allow you to activate a normal trap card the turn that it's set and then immediately bring it back to the field. So it's not often that the Butler just remains there during the duration of the opponent's opening turn, but we actually saw that interaction here.
And then it also counts as like the king.
Well, the Butler's the only one helping out right now, but let's see what other monster comes out of the Labrynth.
It's curious there that it looks like Samuel held on to his Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring.
Maybe he wants to save it for something bigger, but he may not get another chance.
Yeah.
And just like we were saying, every card here is Chimera the Flying Mythical Beast because they've got that great name change effects. Just sort of rifling through here, trying to figure out what the next option is. Again, you certainly have a little bit of confidence having that one game. You do have a game to lose, but you don't want to have too much of the time lost on the clock because then you're down to the wire and we may have to decide this on a life point photo finish.
It's too bad that Samuel doesn't have Sin Keeper in the graveyard, because being able to banish the Chimera to special summon it from the graveyard could really set up quite well against the Labrynth strategy.
Really could, but looks like we're going to use Master Tao the Chancer, getting the full Illusion family out now. So it's going to go ahead and grab an Illusion monster from the graveyard here. So again, Illusion really starting to feel like a full deck. If you've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Since time immemorial, you remember when Warriors and Dragons first started to really come together. This is that feeling. This is their Legacy of Darkness moment.
So now he's seeing Mirror Sword Knight hit the field yet again. Because it is a quick effect, of course, we'll be able to see the effect used here on Raymond's turn.
Take it again, just a very intense look at those Illusion monsters. And it's not, you know, Chimera is good. It's just not a deck that we're seeing at every single table the way we're seeing other, you know, very popular decks. So it does take a moment to just kind of wrap your head around the fact that these monsters are practically immortal.
And he has the interaction here of negating an effect because he controls Chimera, the Flying Mythical Beast.
Passing that name tag around.
But that is an effect that would have worked from the graveyard as well. It just happens to be on the field, but he'll be able to utilize his Mirror Sword Soul to summon from the deck and then utilize the effect in the graveyard. So because you put it on the field, it doesn't necessarily stop him from having those multiple points of interaction.
Will SP Little Knight effect targeting itself and Earthnet?
It looks like we're going to go ahead and pull.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right, you're right.
Oh, no activated effects here. Okay, so we got a little ahead of ourselves there.
We're good, though. Yeah, that's right.
Arias is going to go ahead and get rid of the Baphomet there. And without activating the effects, that SP Little Knight has nowhere to go, so it'll go back to the graveyard. So Raymond going back to the Dimensional Barrier with the lovely effect there to set it. Of course, that sort of trap relay is very powerful.
End of main phase, so tribute to summon from deck.
So we're going to try to grab something that we need here, but that is a really tall order. When you think about it again, you would have to have at least 2 quick effects to be able to get a fusion off, given the fact that we've got the Dimensional Barrier set. It is just waiting and may clinch this game out for Raymond.
Yeah, it's really impressive. I think a lot of this goes back to the ability for Butler to remain on the field through the duration of Samuel's turn so that he could use the effect on field and get it back so that he could attack over 2 monsters. Now that he's established Lovely with Dimensional Barrier, it's going to be pretty tough. As you mentioned, you're going to need multiple quick effects to be able to play through the Dimensional Barrier effect.
Now, Raymond's got an impressive monster lineup, but the funny thing is, we didn't really see that much. He just had the one he needed, and he's been powering through since then.
You know, one of the advantages, though, of the Chimera strategy is there's quite a bit of recursion from the graveyard through some of their banishing effects. Chimera, we see here being able to banish to summon back the big Baphomet.
Now, going to be a little difficult there because the Dimensional Barrier is known. So if you attempt to use any of those Fusion Monsters effects, well, it's not going to be a pleasant time for you since it will be negated.
Still has that Ash Blossom. I wonder if you just used the Ash Blossom on the Welcome Labrynth, what the makeup of this game would have looked like.
The road not taken effectively. Yeah. Now it looks like we're actually moving on to the end phase here. Just going to cut the deck, pass, and now we're going to go to Sam's turn.
Stand by. Main phase.
Now we get to see what few cards we're holding on to. Looks like Ash Blossom, a Chimera Fusion, a Coatl, and I believe a Gazelle. So a lot of starters, but starters that go towards Fusion when you know that Fusion may be off limits.
Total effect, discard to add a card that mentions Chimera Fusion from deck to hand.
So discarding the Coatl to go ahead and add something that mentions Chimera Fusion. And here comes another Mirror Sword Knight. We might be able to get just enough through, but I feel like at this point Samuel may be delaying the inevitable instead of being able to advance through that armada of trap cards.
Especially because we know there's Dimensional Bear. I'm trying to work through a way of navigating the actual Dimensional Bearer.
That should be a backseat driver, right? But when you see a card that powerful, you do have to wonder, okay, we know you're still in this duel, but how are you going to get that done?
Normal summon Gazelle, King of Mythical Claws to activate effect to add.
I have no response.
Again, that's a gorgeous Cornfield Coatl. Certainly a very powerful monster. We're going to have a discardable Surge that also has an activated effect in the grave. It's just really, really neat that Illusion cards got started off just very strong.
So here he gets, I believe now, his second copy of Chimera Fusion in hand. So now he has 2 copies of Chimera Fusion. The problem is, though, even though he might be able to actually put a fusion on the field, its effects are still going to be negated, because if they try to activate in the resolution after the Dimensional Bear has been activated, it's not going to do anything. So he's accumulated 2 copies of a Quick Play, as we were commenting on, that he needed. But even if he's able to put a fusion on the field, the effect's not going to activate. So he needs to put a fusion on the field that will do enough that on the following turn, when Dimensional Bear is no longer active, he's still in a reasonable position, which I'm not sure he's going to be able to do throughout with Raymond's additional spell and trap cards.
Well, looks like we've changed to attack mode. We may be trying to go in, not worrying about our effects anymore because we know that's going to be an uphill battle.
What happened here?
Samuel thinking about whether or not to respond to the Labrynth.
Okay.
I think he almost has to here use the Ash Blossom, because it's also going to allow him to activate his lovely Labrynth.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, unfortunately he cannot use the effect of that Ash Blossom.
Oh,
to
yes,
his
touché,
lovely
yeah,
Labrynth. Yeah, just checking with the judges there too.
Yeah.
Thank goodness we have them on stage to make sure all the rules are enforced fairly.
It even just compounds not using Ash Blossom on the opening turn, that all of a sudden now the card's just stuck in the hand.
And that might be the lesson we learned from this duel. If you are playing against Labrynth, maybe you do want to quickly activate those cards from the hand, because you may not get a chance to later.
Yeah, that just compounds the issue here.
Having to be mindful of those illusions. Certainly just don't want...
It's one of the reasons why Ghost, Bell, and Ash have lined up really well against the Labrynth strategy, because the protection or the inability to negate effects in the aftermath of these larger Lovely and Lady Labrynths hitting the field makes it so that all of a sudden it almost feels like a snowball effect. So utilizing Ash and Ghost Bell as early as possible on cards like Big Welcome and Welcome Labrynth, depending of course on which one's been activated, are really important, because once you get into a game state like this, that Ash Blossom is going to likely sit in Samuel's hand for the rest of the game without being able to be used.
And that is what I mean when I talk about the Labrynth deck being kind of nebulous. You don't realize how deep you're in until it's too late. You think, oh, I've got all these cards. I have all the answers. I'll be fine. But as you, well, get deeper and deeper into the catacombs there, you lose the ability to do anything in response. And so, yeah, if he had activated Ash Blossom, we may not be here. Raymond taking just a quick look there at what monsters to go crash his monsters into. Looks like no response here.
So it looks like he is crashing his Baphomet, the mythical king of Phantom Beasts, which will now allow him during his opponent's turn to banish it and special summon back out one of his Beast, Fiend, or Illusion monsters.
Yeah.
Okay, so here comes the Dogmatica Punishment. We need to send a fusion.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, yeah, that's
Samuel thinking maybe, okay, I had something different, but has decided not to. He already verbally committed to that play, so that's going to be what we're doing here.
Looks like he's setting infinite impermanence. One of the interesting things looking at Raymond's deck with a little bit more detail is he's electing not to play Transaction Rollback, a card that I think had a lot of hype in Labrynth-based strategies before its release.
It's still a cool card and still does a lot for the deck, but it doesn't work with every trap card that you may want it to, so unfortunately it may not have been what duelists were hoping for, but it's still very powerful.
Lovely to destroy a card. On hand or in
So this is that snowball effect that we commented on, that once these normal traps start to get activated, now he's going to be able to utilize his lovely Labrynth to send a card. He's going to start resetting when it goes back to his turn. We have a welcome Labrynth here that's set. The lovely Labrynth in the graveyard will eventually be an interaction as well, allowing him to return a card back to the opponent's hand. So this is really where the Labrynth strategy, I think, compounds its advantage. And there's that Ash Blossom we commented on. So I guess it wasn't going to stay in his hand for the duration of the game. There was an alternative way that it could find its way to the graveyard.
No, that Ash Blossom has been waiting this whole duel to take the hit. So it could go to the graveyard, all those other usable cards could actually stay in the hand, but it's still not looking good for Samuel here. Unfortunately, think about it, Samuel's field is now blank, but Raymond's field really is the same amount of cards, right? Still 3 face downs and still 2 great Labrynth monsters there, so staring his opponent down proudly.
Just unfortunate, that dimensional barrier, because even with those 2 copies of Chimera Fusion, when he had monsters on the field, as we commented on, it just wouldn't have mattered, because in the resolution of those Chimera Fusions, even something like Guardian Chimera wouldn't have an effect. There's really not much that he could be doing, so he's going to utilize the effect. I think now he's going to have 3 Chimera Fusions. Oh, yes.
Oh, dear. And those look strong, but unfortunately, maybe not what you're hoping for.
It's really funny now. Raymond's calculating what could these possibly be as we're sitting here knowing that the 3 copies of Chimera Fusion are set.
It is nice to have the Millennium Eye, just be able to see through your opponent's thoughts and know, wait a sec, those are bluffs. But this isn't. We're going to go ahead and banish 1 Chimera, the Flying Mythical Beast Stripe, for another.
Really heads up. So what Raymond here is doing is he's activating this before the Chimera hits the field. That way there's no possible way of him being able to fusion summon, because with 1 card in hand, you're not going to be able to conduct a Chimera Fusion with only 1 card in hand. But if he got that second monster onto the field, that second monster